So this is what we're making, a twin shank twisted ring. It's basically a real basic puzzle ring, two-part puzzle ring. Fun. Ciao. Get the inside diameter of your ring. You can use an existing ring, or if you have a ring sizer, you can use that. I'm using vernier calipers, digital calipers, and mine says it is 19.3 millimeters. Add the height of the wire that you're using, and 1.4. times 3.14. Now add about 5 millimeters to that, because we're going to make two shanks and twist them, and when we twist them it'll get a little bit shorter. So my measurement is 65 millimeters. I'm going to make it 70. If you're really unsure, add 10 millimeters. It doesn't really matter, because you're going to cut it off and file it later. You can set your calipers. Tighten it. Hook it over the end and drag it across. And it'll give you a nice shiny line to cut to. And if you leave that set, then you can mark the next one. I'm just going to cut this. The blade I'm using is a 4/0. 4/0. File the end. Now, at the moment, I'm not going to worry too much about the ends, because after I've twisted these, I'll check them for length. If they're still too long, I'll either file or cut them again. Now, this is pretty hard, so I'm going to anneal both of these. Place them on your charcoal block, your soldering pad, whatever you're using, and just heat them one at a time. Heat them until they're a dull red. No more than that. Quench it and do the next one. Try to heat them both at the same time. What will happen is you'll get one hotter than the other. You stand a good chance of melting one, or having one that isn't quite annealed. Dry them. I always dry the material just to make sure that we don't rust our files or pliers or any of the steel tools that we're using. Now, I want to put the round part up on both of these, and I'm using my parallel jaw pliers because I can run the wire all the way down the throat hold the other end, and that way the only place that will twist will be right in the gap between the two pliers. Everything else will be held nice and tight. So I'm going to do a full twist. Just like that. So now I've got my nice twist, and the rest of the material is unmarked. There'll be a little mark right where the end of the pliers are, but that's not bad. It's a nice crisp line, and that's what we want. So now I'll just check to see how much length we lost. I started at 70.5 and it is now 69.5. So we only lost a couple of millimeters. And I want this to be 65 millimeters long. So what I'll do is I'll file these two ends so that they're even, measure, and then file the other two ends so that they're even. Now, all of this is still annealed with the exception of the part right there. So I think I'll give it a try to see if I can bend this into an oval so I can solder the ends without annealing it again. Because if I have this work hardened bit here in the middle, nothing should move. Nothing should move very far. So I'm just going to file this with my Swiss number 2 cut flat hand file and measure. And 65 millimeters was my measurement. So we'll saw just to the outside of that mark and then file back to it. Careful when you come through, you don't want to damage the other side. And we're going to use our flat half-round pliers for this. Half-round always goes on the inside. And in the beginning, I'm going to bend them both at the same time. And then I'll do them individually. So we want to get these as nice as we can, because the closer this is, the easier it will be when we go to clean it up. You want to make sure there's no twist. So check both edges. Make sure you don't have a twist. Check the height, make sure that you don't have a step. Beauty. So we're ready to solder. And as you can see, this is going to be a bit like the beginning of a puzzle ring. So when you've soldered it, you can just put the two back together and it'll hold itself in position. I'm just going to hold them one at a time, joint up. Mix up your flux if you haven't already. A little bit on the join. And we're going to use a small piece of hard solder on each one. And because it's such a nice tight join, a small piece of solder is all we need, and it'll be quite easy to clean up. We're going to pick solder. Just heat up our pick, touch the solder. It'll be on a nice ball ready to use. Come from underneath. Place your solder. And I always go to the other side after the first side just to make sure that the solder flowed everywhere I wanted it to flow. Now, quench, just because you want to handle it to check the next one. And the next one needs a little bit of manipulating. Little flux. And I usually rinse my brush out just in case I'm finished soldering. Then I don't have this hard, crusty lump later on. But ideally, as soon as I do this next one, I'll be finished with this. Hopefully. Quench and pickle. We have to pickle before we inspect our solder because the flux will always cover until you pickle. You can't really see 100%. I come out of the pickle. I'm using sodium bisulfite for pickle. Now you can just get the flux off using hot water from your tap, but it doesn't get the oxides off. So we'll reassemble our ring. And put it on our ring mandrel and round it up. So I just push it as far as I can by hand. And then use my rawhide mallet. Slip it off, turn it over. Make sure that your part that's supposed to be over the other part is. Now we're ready to sand our solder joins using our sanding stick with 400 grade wet or dry paper. So just separate it, and you can see it's a really simple little twisted ring, but it's also quite easy to separate it into the individual rings to tidy it up. And because you had a good join to start with, and you used a small amount of solder, you don't have to do much cleanup. So get the sides, get the top, be sure you get all of the solder off. Do them both. And when you finish sanding, it should be really difficult to see your solder join, if not impossible. If you did a really good job of lining the two pieces of material up, it pretty much becomes invisible. Now I'm going to do the inside with a split mandrel, which is just a piece of metal with this split in it so that you can hold sandpaper. And I support the rings. I'll hold one ring and then I'll sand the other one. Always make sure that you keep the sandpaper moving, otherwise you tend to wear little grooves rather than just sanding it flat. That's it. Hallmark it. Sand off your little bump from the hallmark. And depending on the size of your hallmark, it might misshape the ring. Normally it just leaves you a little bump like that, which is quite easy to sand off. And sand that off now, because it's quite easy at this point. If you forget and it's all polished up, you'll have a polished up flat bump, and it's not very attractive. So this can either go in the tumbler, or you can just put it on a wooden ring stick and polish it on your Tripoli and then rouge wheel. So be sure you wash this in between the two wheels so that you don't contaminate the rouge wheel. So I've just polished it up, and what we have is just a twin shank twisted ring, but as you can see, it could be a bit of a puzzle ring. It's about as simple a puzzle ring as you could make.